Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thank God it's Friday, and thank God that you're here as we spend the next hour together. I do hope you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. I've been stating it all along this week that your vote also matters. Coming up tonight, we'll be talking about that with members of the California African American Chamber of Commerce, one of the largest Black chamber of commerces throughout the country. They'll weigh in on the election. We also have the Black American Music Association talking about what they're doing to make sure that Black people are voting this year. And we have the manager, the first manager of Tupac Shakur on tonight's program. He also managed NWA and Ice Cube. He'll be in to talk about this upcoming election and the history and legacy of Tupac. So, in my opening observations, let me give a quote from Tupac Shakur about how he perhaps would talk to Black Americans in these difficult times of a COVID-19 pandemic. He once stated this: "I know it seems hard sometimes, but remember one thing. Through every dark night, there's a bright day after that. So no matter how hard it gets, stick your chest out, keep your head up, and handle it." And that is what we must do. We must handle the problems that come our way effectively, getting out the vote. It's your right. Make sure you do it. And those are my opening observations. So joining me now to talk about all things as it relates to the election that's coming up in just 4 days. And a lot of people are keeping their eyes on the polls and the early voter turnout. But there's also, of course, that this is happening during a pandemic. So I thought, let's bring in Timothy Allen Simon. He's the chairman of the board of directors of the California Black Chamber of Commerce. And then we have Edwin A. Lombard III, who is the president and CEO of the California Black Chamber of Commerce. And gentlemen, before we begin, I understand that there's a name change coming up. Is that correct?
That is correct, Kelly, and thank you, Edwin. We are officially the California African American Chamber of Commerce and the California African American Action Fund. And we had our launch yesterday with a event. It was a fireside chat with myself and former San Francisco mayor and longest standing speaker of the California legislature and commentator on many news networks, Willie Lewis Brown Jr., which was absolutely phenomenal. And we are now under a new name, a new entity, but the same direction of connecting the businesses throughout the diaspora to the California market.
Well, first of all, congratulations, especially on having the honorable and esteemed former mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, who is a man who needs no introduction because of the great work that he's done politically. I want to ask both of you, and Edwin, I guess I'll begin with you. With the voter turnout that's going on right now throughout all of the states, we're seeing record number turnout for voters, early voting in the key critical battleground states for this election. What does that say to you?
Well, the first thing it says to me is that people are awake and paying attention. And it also says that a number of African Americans are making their way to the polls, and people of color, maybe who have never voted before, maybe who feel that there is definitely time for a change, and that they're not going to make the mistake that they made in 2016. It's time for them to have their voices heard. They understand that the vote is the most important way to get that done. And they also understand that our ancestors died so that we can have this right. So it means that people are awake, they're paying attention, and they're looking for change. And they're going to do everything they can to make sure that that happens.
Change is on the ballot. People do want to change. And in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic and the racial divide, let's talk about the heartbreak that this COVID pandemic has caused for African Americans with regard to their health and also to their wealth. And because you represent one of the largest chambers of commerce in the country, how do we find the help for Black American business owners at a time when Congress still has stalemated on renewing a new stimulus plan?
Well, first off, I'm glad you brought up the health issue, because this pandemic affects Black people in a totally different way than it affects most other races. And it has not been widely publicized. But there is a lot of different things that happen within our bodies with this pandemic that are, it's just unheard of. And because of it, we've got record number of people who are dying from this in the Black community. And like I said, it's not publicized as much as it should be. And also, based on a study that was done by the Black Chamber, 41% of all Black businesses are shutting down or have already closed because of the pandemic. 41%. Most of our businesses are small businesses, and we depend on the support of the community where our businesses are for us to thrive and to be successful. Well, when our members cannot, or our customers cannot make it to our restaurants and our stores and our entertainment facilities, then we have no income. And a lot of the time we develop businesses because either we can't find a job, we aren't given a job, or not given an opportunity to have a job. So we develop our own businesses. So it's important that these businesses thrive, because without them, the community that they exist in will not thrive also. So it's a heavy toll that the Black community is suffering right now because of COVID-19. As a solution, one of the ways that I think we're going to be able to pull ourselves out of this is we're going to have to learn how to work together with each other. I believe that when you reach across the aisle and you partner with another business, and two small businesses then become a bigger business, and you can then take on opportunities that are made available to you. Case in point, in California, there are state contracts that, millions of dollars that can be had. But if you don't have the capacity to take on the contract, you won't get the contract. It could be a simple matter of you partnering with another Black-owned businesses, another Black-owned business, in order to have the capacity, and then you can take on these state contracts. Also, there's corporate contracts that are out there that are available. There's lots of different ways, but we have to learn how to get out of our silos and think about working for self, partner with other organizations, build capacity so that we can take on some of these opportunities.
We're coming back with much more after the break. I couldn't help, Timothy, but wince when Edwin discussed that 41% of Black businesses have been impacted by this COVID-19. And yet, what I like about what you're both saying is that there is a solution. And the solution is that we must come together, work together, and build together, as we did so long ago. During civil rights, before civil rights, we always worked together to build up our communities. We should never lose sight of that, because beyond this election, Timothy, it's where we have to go to get through this COVID-19 pandemic, is it not?
Well, yes, it is. And, Kelly, I'm very proud on my mother's side to be a descendant of Tulsa, Oklahoma. My mother was born and raised on Greenwood. My great-grandfather had a construction company that built a number of the buildings on Greenwood. So the notion of Black empowerment, Black wealth, creation and succession. My father is also an entrepreneur, and God rest both of their souls, very successful businessman. So I know that we've been through a lot, but we've also survived. And I believe that we will thrive. I think that there is an enormous amount of pent-up demand in the marketplace. We have to better utilize social media and other mechanisms in order to deliver our goods and services. I think we have a burgeoning generation of young entrepreneurs, the hustle and grind gig community out there. Chambers need to provide them the platform and the resources to guide us into this new frontier during this pandemic and after this pandemic. And that's what I'm hoping chambers around the country, both local, state, and national, are looking at, in order for us to utilize this as an opportunity, to see it as the glass half full. Yes, 1 in 5 of the COVID deaths are African Americans. But we've seen other challenges in our lives, and we had to stand up and fight this, change the regime in Washington, push Congress to pass the HEROES Act, and then get busy with getting paid.
Let me ask you both something, because we don't know the outcome of the election. We may not know it we may not know the day of, depending on how the voter turnout is on the day of the election. And with all of the ways that the ballots still have to be counted, it may be a while. But regardless of who wins, how important is it for chambers like yours to keep putting the pressure on the president, regardless if it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, and then putting pressure on Congress, just as you've said, to do the right thing, get everything passed to help the American people and not overlook or marginalize the Black community?
Well, as a state chamber, we've worked with actually both sides of the aisle. We held COVID-19 webinars with the White House, and particularly the Small Business Administration. We also met with Maxine Waters through a webinar, and now Vice Presidential candidate Kamala Harris. So we recognize as business people, we cannot allow ourselves, as Edwin said, to be siloed in any capacity. You have to look at markets from a global standpoint. However, we cannot ignore our history and our ancestors who are speaking to us, pushing for change. So I've made it very clear in your show, Kelly, where I stand in terms of the next election. But this chamber will work with, the late great CEO of Kaiser Permanente, Bernard J. Tyson once said to me, he said, Timothy, as a CEO of the #1 health or the largest health care organization in the country, I'm with whatever party's in power. And that's the way business people, unfortunately or fortunately, have to look at markets and understanding how you deal with the political and regulatory environment, regardless of who is in power.
Gentlemen, thank you. Edwin A. Lombard III, Timothy Allen Simon, and the name of the organization is now what?
The California African American Chamber of Commerce and the California African American Action Fund.
Yes.
All right. We'll have you back on as often as possible, especially as we move forward. We've got to keep moving this ball forward. Let's be relentless in this. And if they don't answer the door, we've knocked politely, we've knocked loudly. We might have to break the door down.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back with more after this. Welcome to the program. When it comes to this election season, it's all hands on deck. Now, I want to point out something very important. The Black American Music Association is dedicated to preserve, protect, and promote the legacy and future of authentic Black American music. But they're also doing something to support the culture. You see, BAM, or Black American Music, has partnered now with Voting Rights Are Civil Rights, and together, they're one of the partners for Poll Hero, which has successfully organized some 35,000 poll workers for Election Day around the country. Now, I don't know if you know that or not, but that's a big deal. So let's bring in Michael Malton and Demet Guidry of the Black American Music Association to weigh in on this and talk about it. Gentlemen, it's good to have you on the program. How important is this partnership that you've created now?
Well, for us, Kelly, I'll tell you, it's been critical because unlike election cycles in the past, this one being in a pandemic, one of the key suppression things that we identified earlier, one of the tactics, which there's 65 of them, in voter suppression would be the fact that there would be a poll worker shortage this year, particularly because our elderly population that usually goes out and staff the polls, there would be less of them to do so this year. And when we sat in our meetings and we're talking about what sort of initiative we get involved in for the community, that was one that raised its hand for us. And then to find out that the poll workers unlike the information that was floating around our community, that these were volunteer positions, we learned that these positions were paid positions. So in addition to fulfilling the need to staff the polls so that we could combat some voter suppression, we also knew that our community and our young folks, particularly our Gen Z folks, were sitting at home and needed jobs and needed work. So we thought that we would engage the community on that level. And it was critically important to do so.
And Demet and Michael, to my understanding that you've been able to go out and actually get about 1,000 people who are in Atlanta, for example, where the Atlanta partner is Georgia Youth Poll Worker Project. And so now both the Black American Music Association and Voting Rights or Civil Rights are also working with CSA 2020. Demet, you were talking about that voter suppression. Michael, how desperate are these times in which we live that we see that people are trying to turn back the clock on Black Americans through various ways of voter suppression?
Yeah, it's really desperate, and it's very important. I mean, regardless of how people, in a nonpartisan way, regardless of how people vote or what they think or what side of the aisle, as you say, would be on, we just want to make sure that it's fair. We want to make sure more than anything, our community, the Black community, gets a fair shot, a fair look at everything. And as I was saying, even as we were coming on, Kelly, I think it's important for our legacy and our future and the next generation. And we're also trying to break it down a little bit so that our younger demo understands how critical this is right now to have our voices heard. And we have been suppressed for years. And to Demet's point about even, the difference between being paid to work the polls or just thinking it's a volunteer role, the ignorance in our community, not so much on us, but it is on us, but we have just not really digested the information, or it hadn't been handed down to us in a way to make us pay attention, like I think we are starting to do as a community this year for various reasons. And us living, I'm on the West Coast right now, but we all live down south pretty much. To see it and just to see what is going on in the streets, the hatred that's in the streets, the dismay, we have to do something because, again, our children and our next generation depends on it, and we can't go backwards from where we've been.
We're coming back with much more after the break. You know, what you just said is a mouthful of heartbreak for people who are from our generation, looking at the heroic work and courageous work that so many people did in marching through Selma and being exposed to all kinds of violence just so we'd have this right to vote. Demet, I want to come to you, but I'm reminded now, Eric Cohen of CSA, founder of Voting Rights, or Civil Rights, I should say, says, and I'm quoting him here, "It saddens me that 55 years after the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, there is a need for see something, say something in this day and time, just to be sure that our vote is counted and not marginalized and not forgotten and not trampled upon." How does that make you feel, knowing that we're in this current climate and we have to fight the forces that are trying to take us backwards?
Yeah, I mean, I join Eric in saying and expressing my sadness as well, because a lot of these tactics that we're talking about have been in play for 20 years. So it is about educating the voters, particularly the youth, because voting is different in every state. And even when it came to engaging our artist community, a lot of those guys didn't have the information, but wanted to speak to their fan base. So it's about educating the artists, educating the artist management teams, working with other stakeholders, like we're working with UMG's Task Force for Meaningful Change. And we all, have the same sentiment that we must educate our community. And not only for the national election, if I may say
Right.
this, it's even more critically important moving forward on the local level. and some of these senatorial races, some of the local races that are going to be coming up in the next next couple of years that are critical when we talk about some of the DAs and some of the attorney generals, some of the sheriff races. So we feel, because we are in the entertainment business and we are, driving culture right now, and have been for quite a while, by the way, it's important for us to use that pipeline or that channel, if you will, to get the information out the way that we know how, and talk to one another, and educate each other. So we can sit around and complain, and everything has its place, particularly in the time of social justice. Protesting is important. All those things are important, but none more important than educating yourself about how the process truly works. And we can affect change, on the front end. So we don't have to march on the back end, about some of the deaths and things like that. Let's get these guys out of there. So once we feel like once we get that messaging out there and create that education, though we're sad now, joy comes in the morning,
Yeah.
Come on, man. You're going to preach now? You will get me say hallelujah.
Amen.
So Michael, look, this is really, first of all, I find it just so heartwarming that such an organization like this, as prestigious as it is not forgetting where we come from and the work that has to be done. I think to Demet's point, he was talking about Generation Z. There are a lot of reasons, a myriad of reasons for young people to be out on the front lines protesting, but it's so good to see that young people can come to work as a poll worker and be actively involved in voting and in the civic responsibilities that we have.
Yeah. And it's equally as important for all of us, our families, my age group, our generation. What we are at BAM is we consider ourselves bridging the generation gap, because so often that conversation falls on deaf ears. The kids don't necessarily want to hear what we have to say, and we are kind of pushing ourselves on them and not really hearing them. So I think that, where we are with the Black American Music Association is saying, let's take everything that we are as a community, let's bring it together and have us all be united as one in some kind of way. So we're stepping up to be that leader, that leading group. And one thing that we do know, music and entertainment is a driver. Is let the music and entertainment, like you were playing Marvin Gaye a few minutes ago, what's going on is perfect. Let this music be the wind beneath the wings to carry us forward. And so we talk about it all the time in our weekly meetings or even our daily conversation. As BAM, our responsibility speaks for itself. We have to be in the forefront. We need to be a leadership group that understands what's going on and have to make sure that we're doing it in a hip enough way that the kids recognize it and recognize how important it is. There's a couple of songs out right now. This kid, Yellow Pain, love what he's doing. Love the way he's talking and breaking it down and talking about the branches of government, to Demet's point, so that in the next year, really starting in February, where we can have a chance to really start to speak up again, not just for this presidential election, but so we'll know what's going on the local and regional front. Because, in our Black community, a lot of the men, particularly Black men, young Black men, are incarcerated, and things happen that just from living that street life, which it goes along with the territory. However, that allows us to continue to be disenfranchised when it comes to having voting rights. So you look around and you figure out, how do we move this needle so that our influence can be felt all across? And that's what's important to us as
powerful, absolutely powerful, and empowering and educational, inspirational and aspirational. Gentlemen, look, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a pause for the calls. When we come right back, I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about this wonderful organization and the music that we continue to make, because there's a message in our music. Back with more of Michael Malden and Demet Guidry of the Black American Music Association coming up next. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to members of the Black American Music Association, and they have partnered with some very worthy organizations who are out there for the cause, and that is to make sure that we can ensure that our vote is not suppressed and that we're having a lot of voter turnout. Now, I would be remiss, though, if I didn't have these two brothers on and not talk about the influence of Black American music, because as your website aptly says, it is the mother of all popular musical genres and one of America's greatest exports to the world. As an art form, it deserves to be protected by those who have enjoyed the benefits of it and those who have labored to advance it. Now, to Met and Michael, I tell you no joke, when I was covering the war in Iraq, in Baghdad, I heard hip hop music being played, and I was thinking it was one of the US soldiers. When I went outside of that compound, it was a young Iraqi boy living in Baghdad with a boombox blasting hip hop music.
Yeah.
That's how instrumental we are. When I've been to Africa, obviously, I've seen hip hop and other art forms, Marvin Gaye, all of them being played. So the influence that Black Americans have is beyond our comprehension sometimes, is it not?
It really is.
1000%.
It really is. And you know, the fact that we've been in the music industry 30 plus years and have traveled the world, we get to see it firsthand.
Yeah.
And, you know, and a lot of times, particularly the creatives, you know, that are born in our community sometimes don't understand that because they're looking at charts or they're judging their success or the influence of the music, maybe by indicators like charts or awards that half the times we're disenfranchised from anyway. But those that know, and we're talking across all sort of categories, including fashion and automotive and everything else, that Black culture is driving all of that. And we like to say it this way, that Black American music drives Western culture, and Western culture drives world culture. So in fact, Black American music is the driver of culture all around the world.
I'm glad you're a major part of it. I'm glad you're part of the solution, not the problem. You're moving it forward. So we're going to make every joyful noise that we possibly can about all that you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing to get out the vote and to protect the vote. And furthermore, continue to do the great things that you're doing with the music. You know, I don't feel no ways tired. Okay.
Amen.
Not at all. And
Amen.
Kelly, if I may, before we get off,
Yeah.
Although we started this organization in 2017, we're just now opening it up for membership. You know, and we will be, you know, it is a membership driven organization. Our focus for that kicks off really in 2021, but we want to bring everybody in and be supportive, no different than some of the other organizations, some of our friends at the Country Music Association and NARAS. That's who we are. We are the governing body for Black American music and its culture, and we invite you to join us.
Count me in. I'm already there.
No doubt.
Already
Appreciate
there.
it.
Love you both. Thank you for bringing such a great information and dropping some inspiration on us. And we're all going to stay woke. Thank you both very much. God bless you.
All right.
Thank you, Kelly.
Appreciate
And if you
it.
guys see something, say something. Go to csay2020.com.
Coming up next, we'll be talking to the manager, the first manager of Tupac Shakur. He's next. So welcome back to the program. We're talking all things as it relates to the election, just 4 days away now. A lot of people are focusing on that. We know that a lot of African-American pioneers in music have done a lot to blaze the trail to get people out to vote. One of those was a young man by the name of Tupac Shakur, as well as NWA, and of course, Ice Cube. Ice Cube's been on this program, as you know, discussing his contract with Black America. He incurred a little bit of wrath from some people who didn't understand what he was trying to do when the Trump administration ran to it and picked it and adopted it. And the Biden campaign said, we'll talk about it after the election. But be that as it may, I want to bring in a man who's actually been involved with all of those particular groups. His name is Atron Gregory. He has a diverse and extensive resume as a tour and artist manager, A&R executive, and executive producer, from selling albums out of the back of his car with Crew Cut Records to executive producing one of my favorite artists, Stanley Clarke's last two albums, The Message as well as Up. And 2020 marks the launch of Gregory's latest project, Solo Piano Group. We're going to talk about that later on in this program tonight. But getting right to the point, Atron, it's good to have you on the program, and your long history of working with Tupac Shakur, the first manager who got him his first record deal, your work with Digital Underground. You also have catalogs to Johnny Guitar Watson, and then you also work with FGW Productions. Where do I begin to ask the right question with you? Because there's so much. Let's go back to Tupac Shakur and the fact that he was politically active and motivated. And how can young people today, with all that's going on with coronavirus, with all that's going on with racial division, focus on the example he had about telling people to activate their power?
Well, I think that what Tupac had more than anything was no fear. He said what he believed to be true, and he did what he believed to be true. In this time period, all young people, I think, can do the same thing, and safely though, because now we're in the situation with coronavirus and some civil unrest. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but they can do the same thing safely. And Kelly, before I continue, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show.
Man, it's a pleasure. It's an honor to have you on the show. And I'm honored to have you on as well. And we're going to be introducing one of your solo piano artists coming up. But I want to thank you for the work that you did with not only Tupac Shakur, but also NWA and Ice Cube. As you know, Cube put out that contract with Black America. He had a lot of scholars working on that. And he put it out there, and he received some heat for the fact that the Trump administration adopted it. The Biden administration looked at it and said, we'll deal with it after the election. What do you think about Cube's contribution and the fact that he's been politically active and awake, just like Tupac?
Well, I've known Cube since he was 16 years old. And, he has truly evolved. And the effort that he's doing to make a change is heroic. He's working to make a difference. He's working to give people economic empowerment, and that's huge. Economic empowerment for the Black community is huge. And I've watched many of his interviews, and I'm happy that he's out there doing. Is everything going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But who else is out there striving to make a difference for our community? And I think it's huge.
As we look at the pandemic, as we look at the racial divide since George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on, I know that Tupac is not here, but how would he view the current climate, in your opinion?
Well, the Tupac I knew at 25 years old would probably be the loudest voice in the room, the loudest voice in the nation. He would not sit quietly. That's not what he did. And if he was the same person today that he was now, then he would be absolutely the loudest person in the room. He would have the megaphone. He would, if he couldn't do it on a large scale, he would do it wherever he could. He would make a difference wherever he went.
Atron Gregory I'm talking to right now. He's a manager and producer extraordinaire. He's done so many things working with Tupac Shakur, NWA, Digital Underground, and the great Stanley Clarke. You can tell that I like Stanley, I like all of your artists. And more importantly, I think America really needs to know who and what you do and how you've helped influence these artists, and how that camaraderie between them has gone on to bode well for Black Americans, and also for the people globally who have been enthusiastically supportive of their music. Tupac Shakur being taught in classrooms now, his philosophy and his style. When we return, I understand there's a new project that you're working on. I really want to talk about that because you are exposing another genre to your your great bandwidth of talent. I'm talking to Tron Gregory. When we come back, we're going to talk about his solo piano music project. And for all of us who are stressed out with high anxiety, you'll love what he's about to do. We're back with more of Tron Gregory after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm having a great conversation with Tron Gregory, and he has such a diverse and extensive resume to talk about. But the greatest thing that many people know him for is his work with Tupac Shakur, with NWA, as well as Digital Underground, as Stanley Clarke. But he's doing something else, and I'm so excited about this because, you know, Tron, there's a lot of high anxiety and stress out here right now. Let's forget about the election for a moment and just get a woosah moment with what you're doing with your new musical project. And you've got one of your artists here with you. Tell us about it.
Solo Piano Group is the name of the project. Glenn Pearson is the pianist that's here with us. There's multiple pianists on this project, and that's really what it's about. It's about the woosah moment. There is so much stress going on in society now, but even beforehand. And you know what we're working towards doing is finding some music that's calming and relaxing. And this is not new music. This is something that's been done. But what I found, there were no African American artists doing it, and I was shocked because we all listen to it. We all listen to piano music, relaxing piano music, ambient music, but you don't see any African Americans doing it. So I decided to take my independent company and go to some friends of mine, Glenn being one of them, and saying, let's do this. Let's do something a little different than it's been done before for our culture and our community. And that's what it's all about.
Okay. Glenn, welcome to the program. You are one of the artists that's now working with Tron through TNT Recordings with solo music. Solo piano, I'm sorry. Tell me about this opportunity that you have.
Okay, firstly, thanks for having me on board. It's
Yeah.
a pleasure to be here. Let me say that when I was initially approached by Atron to become involved in this, I was, of course, given his stellar track record and the reputation and standing in the industry. I was rather honored. And of course, it was taking things in a direction that I hadn't considered previously. So I also looked upon it as being a challenge. And, it's always in terms of creative stimulation and, how do you say, continued growth. I'm always looking to look at new directions and possibilities beyond those that I have already been, as I said, continuously involved in. So, yeah, so it's the aspect of the piano, the solo piano group, as Atron mentioned, geared towards the idea of piano, the ambient sort of music that a lot of people attribute to the likes of, say, George Winston and others. But as he mentioned, that it happens to be a category and a genre where there haven't been a lot of African Americans involved. So I was also motivated by that aspect of it. So that was also one of the further catalysts of inspiration that brought me on board with this venture.
There's every reason in the world to do that. And as we get through this, through all of this that we're going through right now, and of course, the big elephant in the room is the election. I'm just going to say that I'm going to make an appeal for you as well as Glenn. Go out and get solo piano and give yourself a respite from all the noise that's going out there right now. Because Glenn, what you and Atron are putting out is really a joyful, relaxing sound that lifts up the spirit and the soul and illuminates the mind. I love it. I love it. Atron, just good to have you on, man, and Glenn as well. As you continue to forge new ground, what are you anticipating with this project? Because you have other artists coming on as well.
Yeah, so we have our newest release today, and we have new sessions coming up we're in a sense remixing some of the music and putting rain and ambient sounds behind it. So we have a plethora of new songs coming out all throughout 2021, and then we'll start working towards 2022 soon. So we're just excited to do this, and excited that we can bring a little relaxing and calm through the solo piano group to people, and hopefully everyone listens, streams, however you listen, YouTube, Spotify, Pandora. Maybe I shouldn't be doing all that on your show.
No, you should. Absolutely. Shameless plugging is never bad.
but just however you listen to music, just listen to it. And if it touches you, please share it with your friends.
Yeah, well, it definitely touches me. And Glenn, we're going to play one of your songs as we close out tonight. But God bless you both. And I just love all the things that you bring to the table, both of you. And I know there's more to come. The best is yet to come, as they say. And so I'm just going to go off on the weekend and chill.
There you go. And Kelly, thank you very much for having us both. We appreciate it.
Again, it's my honor and my pleasure to have both of you on. My best to you and everyone, especially in your musical family. And tell Stanley Clark, come on by.
I will.
God bless you both. We'll be coming back with my final word and music from solo piano, Glenn Pearson, under the watchful and managing care of Atron Gregory. Back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. I'd like to thank all of the guests who appeared on tonight's show, and I especially want to thank you for taking time out to watch. I do appreciate you. In closing tonight, it was Tupac Shakur who once said, "Don't live to fight, fight to live." That's true. Let's fight to live, to embrace the day throughout this pandemic. Let's fight to live, to vote. Let's fight to live, to always seek to do the right thing. Hopefully we've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. We leave you tonight with the great music of Glenn Pearson and his solo piano project. And by the way, Glenn Pearson used to play with the Count Basie Orchestra. Good night, everyone. Have a great weekend.